Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Public Works Committee will please come to order. We have just two items on the general agenda this afternoon. I'll just let you know that item G3 is being postponed. As usual, we have a general agenda and a consent agenda. We'll take the consent agenda items first. Are there any of those that a council member wants to have pulled for discussion?
If not, I move for approval of the balance.
Second.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Consent agenda is approved, and we will go to item G1, please.
Item G1, review of proposed Business 40 streetscape design.
And I believe, excuse me, Mr. Turner is presenting.
Mr. Chairman, the manager is going to make a few opening comments, and then we'll have a presentation by Christy Turner instead of me.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to talk for a minute about all of the hard work that the many different groups have done over the last 6 to 8 weeks. We have been meeting NCDOT, Winston-Salem DOT, Creative Corridors, our consultants from Stimmel. We've been meeting weekly, and as you know, it's a challenge to mold together all the different desires and requirements, both from appearance, engineering, transportation, but it's really come together, and every week the spirit of that group has been, let's figure out how we can come up with a win-win. And I think we really have done much of that, and there's a few things to be tweaked, but it's really been a lot of hard work. I want to thank Randall Tuttle, who we drafted in the back to kind of chair that group. We drafted him to do that, and he volunteered. But again, it's really coming along, and I really do want to thank all the people who have given a lot of their time to get us to where we are today.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to thank you all for being here this evening, and I need some help getting this on the screen.
And again, if you would be so kind as to reintroduce yourself to folks.
Sure. There we go. Thank you. I'm Christy Turner with Stimmel Associates, project manager for this project as a consultant with the city of Winston-Salem. Again, I was here 2 months ago to go through this project presentation. I think we had good discussion on this project, and I think we've made good progress, as Mr. Garrity was saying earlier. So some of this will be a repeat from last time, but there is some new information in here, and I look forward to the discussion afterwards. Again, the project mission here is to provide a complete and creative streetscape design and master plan for the Business 40 corridor and the adjacent streets. Just a quick project overview. Our tasks were to develop a streetscape master plan for the corridor. It has to be compatible with DOT roadway design and federal requirements. The multi-use path was something that was proposed in the Creative Corridors master plan, and we were to look at whether that was feasible, and if so, to provide a preliminary design, and that we have done. We also had to coordinate with Creative Corridors Coalition, abide by their guidelines and master plan, and also work within the preferences of the Business 40 working groups. And then also at the end, we're identifying costs for betterments, and that's something that we'll cover in detail next month. Project scope, again, tasks 1 through 5, research and analysis were completed last year. Master planning was just completed recently. Design guidelines are in progress, but almost complete. We'll start the specifications once we have approval from you all and council in July to move forward, and then the visualization is completed. Again, just to recap the analysis summary, we do have an opportunity for two-way conversion for Main Liberty Church 1st and 2nd Streets, and Davenport is looking at that as a different project. The multi-use path is feasible, even with the Cherry Marshall interchange. The strollway is going to go over Business 40. That is feasible and preferred by most parties. There will be developable area and open space potential at Peters Creek Parkway, Broad Street interchange, and Liberty Street. Cherry Marshall will remain one-way thoroughfares as part of the interchange. And there are mixed reviews on material preferences, but I think we're bringing that all in line. And then there are budget constraints, as always. As partners in this project, we share ideas, responsibilities, costs in order to create a functional, creative, and precedent-setting roadway project in the state of North Carolina. And our partners in this project are DOT, the City of Winston-Salem, and Creative Corridors. Just a little briefing on Creative Corridors. Their goals and objectives, green, artful, iconic networks will create a gain for Winston-Salem with improved economic development, bringing investment, tourism, industry, and jobs to our area, enriching the lives of all in our community. The public participation has been an ongoing effort for many years now, from the DOT end of things to Creative Corridors. There's been many meetings over the years that all of us have been to, at least some of them. The outreach summary was provided by DOT last year at one of the public hearings, and you can see that it goes all the way back to 2007 with public engagement. And then the Creative Corridors has had over 100 public meetings in all parts of the city as part of their master planning process. Hundreds of active members, participation in and attention to the NEPA process, and public art review committee chosen for bridge design process. And at the bottom, that graphic represents the 2011 year of meetings that were had, and it was a lot of meetings. Master planning phase, and this is still partially a recap. We're going to look at local street design, land use, strollway alignment, and multi-use path. Local street design, we are looking at bridge widening for sidewalks. These are some of the more functional items that are betterments for this project. Bike lanes and share lanes where feasible. Street trees are something we want to have as part of our local streets. Pedestrian scale ornamental street lights, and intersection enhancements, including high visibility crosswalks, signage, branding, and artful opportunities. The local street network, you can see all the local streets that cross Business 40, highlighted in red, with the major intersections at each end, and then you can see some other local streets that are parallel to Business 40, highlighted in green. I think we all want our local streets in downtown especially to be good for all people, and whether it's a cyclist or a pedestrian, a person in a wheelchair or a vehicle. And I think this is a lot of what this project is about, is making sure that we set up the infrastructure to have these good local streets when we're done with this project. There is a lot of potential open space and developable land available as part of this project. You'll notice the ballpark redevelopment area. I added that because I know that's a project that was just released in the paper not too long ago. So that is a large chunk of land that will be redeveloped in the near future, hopefully. We do have the potential for a linear park along Peters Creek Parkway. We also have a couple of properties. The motel is uncertain as to where that's going right now. And then the part of the interchange that is south of Business 40 could be developable property. At this point, we're proposing a green space north of Broad Street. And then also we have the area at the Strollway. And I think as part of the CCC guidelines and master plan, and as part of this project, I think we've all confirmed that we feel very strongly about creating a park on both sides of Business 40 as part of the Strollway going over 40. And then there is potential developable land on either side of that. Multi-use path. We brought this up last time. This was also in the Creative Corridors Master Plan. And like I said, this is a game-changing opportunity to develop world-class bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in Winston-Salem. It's an incredible opportunity. With that comes the potential for new real estate frontage, and which can also attract new businesses and population diversity. This type of infrastructure tends to do that. There are also transportation benefits, public health benefits, environmental benefits, but there are some schedule-critical components. Multi-use path features, it is an east-west bicycle pedestrian connector that will tie into other existing and proposed projects in the neighborhood. It'll be a minimum of 10-foot width with an average of 12. It will provide connections to Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center, BB&T Ballpark, Green Street Pedestrian Bridge, the Rail Trail and Innovation Quarter, Strollway, and local city streets and bike and pedestrian facilities. And again, there are opportunities for future frontage development. Just a few images of other projects like this around the world, and this is one that is very similar. It's along a busy highway, and it is separated by Jersey barriers and fencing. If you happened to be in downtown Winston-Salem a couple weekends ago for the Cycling Classic, you would have noticed a lot of cyclists and just in general a lot of people downtown. And it was a very exciting weekend to see so many people enjoying our streets. and our public spaces. And the more we can get of this in downtown, the better we are, I believe. The overall network, you can see that highlighted in this magenta color, and that is the network, the MUP that parallels Business 40. All the gold stars are locations where we have at-grade access. So I feel like we have very good connections to the local neighborhoods, streets, businesses, and larger establishments along that path. The blue are bike lanes, and then the green are other existing or proposed greenways. Some of the critical infrastructure that we need to get in with this Business 40 project. It is minimal. We've tried to get it to the minimum possible. The Peters Creek Parkway Bridge will need to be widened to accommodate this path, and that would be a 12-foot wide clear path. And then this pedestrian tunnel that goes under Peters Creek Parkway, that would be critical to do. It would be very prohibitive to do in the future. And with that, we would have to provide access to the public street on both sides. Just a few images, and you did see these last time. This would be on the west side of Peters Creek Parkway, looking back towards the ballpark and downtown. And then on the east side of Peters Creek Parkway, looking back towards the west. And to the right there, you see the public access that would be built with this first phase. A little further out, you can see Peters Creek Parkway Bridge in the background. In the downtown section, we do have two items that are critical, and that is Broad Street Bridge lengthening so that we can get under Broad Street, as well as Cherry Street Bridge lengthening, again, so we can get under Cherry Street. And from the Broad Street Bridge, this would be the view of that potential open space that would be on the north side of Business 40, looking back towards downtown. And then here you can see the multi-use path along Business 40. So just in summary, bridge widening at Peters Creek Parkway for the multi-use path, the tunnel and access at Peters Creek Parkway. There are some retaining walls, curb and gutter, and miscellaneous items that need to be constructed. The Broad Street and Cherry Street bridge lengthening. Now we're going to move on to Creative Corridors Coalition priority projects. A lot of you have probably seen this graphic before. There are 5 main projects on here that they are committed to funding over the next several years. 2 of those are not part of this project, but are ongoing, and that is the Research Parkway at the Twin Arches Bridge and the Martin Luther King Jr. Drive betterments. And then the ones associated with this project would be the Peters Creek Parkway Bridge, the Green Street Pedestrian Bridge, and the Strollway Pedestrian Bridge. Designer bios, just really briefly, Creative Corridors employed Donald McDonald, a world-renowned bridge designer, and his team regularly produces innovative and creative concepts, working closely with engineers and transportation departments to realize the client's vision through architectural detailing and material finishes. Walter Hood, a landscape architect. He is a North Carolina native, an accomplished landscape architect. He and his team focus on environmental design, public spaces, and artful and thoughtful designs. Their projects repeatedly focus on the blending of social, environmental, and physical needs into meaningful spaces. And then Larry Kirkland, he believes that carefully conceived public art installations and environments can create places of meaning within communities. The best of public art can challenge, delight, educate, and illuminate, but most of all, it can celebrate the qualities that make each place unique. And then, of course, Design Workshop, who prepared the Creative Corridors Coalition Master Plan and Design Guidelines. And they've been working with our community for many years now. The Green Street Pedestrian Bridge. NCDOT has already planned to replace the existing roadway bridge that is closed with a standard pedestrian bridge. Our goal and Creative Corridors' goal is to enhance this bridge and make it an iconic feature from the west edge of downtown. They engaged Donald McDonald to work on this project. With its arching structure, this bridge will serve as an artful and iconic western gateway into downtown Winston. And to the right, you see a few of the couple of the initial sketches provided by Donald McDonald. And so we have incorporated these models. We've actually constructed these models in a 3D program and integrated them into our renderings so that you can see everything blended together. So this is the Green Street Pedestrian Bridge, and this is looking to the west. You can see the ballpark in the background. And then the view to the east, looking towards downtown, and this is an incredible view. Looking at the double arches, you have a lower arch, and in that arch you would have fencing that goes across the bridge, this lower level, and then the higher arches. The strollway is proposed to go over Business 40, as we've covered before. Minimum of 12 feet wide. Open space opportunities both north and south of Business 40 create a central green linking the historic communities of Winston and Salem. Creative Corridors Coalition design focuses on the pedestrian experience and integrates the landscape from the park space on either end onto the bridge itself. A few inspirational photos just to kind of get where we're headed. Walter Hood really looked at this as a landscape experience, as mentioned in his bio, and so he really wanted to celebrate the parks on either end and bring that onto the bridge itself for the pedestrian. So to the right here, you see the High Line, which if any of you have been there, you'll know it's a fabulous experience. And then there's a couple here that are both very similar, although not in urban areas like the High Line. And so our renderings now, again, we have created these models in our 3D program and integrated the graphics. So this would be the 12-foot wide pedestrian and cycling bridge that would go over 40 as the strollway. You can see the fencing here in the background that's somewhat disguised when you're on the bridge with the vegetation that grows up around it. And then downtown, we're looking north in this direction. Looking west from the driver's perspective, it'd be a simple concrete beam or a concrete bridge structure that would have planting structures embedded in the bridge itself with lightweight soils and media. The fencing could have, I think we plan on that having lighted columns or posts for the fencing so that that could light up at night. And then we also have the opportunity to form line these concrete beams so that they have a little bit of texture and interest to them. And then looking from the west to the east, you can see the Strollway Bridge here. And a big part of this is the importance of landscapes both north and south of this project. And those are things that can be somewhat completed with this project, but can also be enhanced over the long term. Peters Creek Parkway Bridge. The arches are integrated into the bridge structure. Transparent noise walls on the west side of the bridge. Wider sidewalks, west side at 12 feet clear for the MUP. And then the artist Larry Kirkland proposes brick columns at each end of the bridge with large-scale iconic sculptures and lighting sculptural elements integrated into the noise wall supports. And you can see kind of an overhead view of those sculptures here. And these are still being worked on. This is very conceptual at this stage. And you can see that integrated into the rendering here. You have the arched bridge itself. You have the clear noise wall, and then you have the large brick columns on either end with a very large sculpture about 30 feet, I believe, on top of that. And then this would be the pedestrian's perspective looking north. And again, you can see these brick columns that help to anchor this transparent noise wall. One of the other proposals was to bring that vertical element to the east side, even though it's not required by the project. It may not be an actual noise wall, but it could be something that's vertical and matches on the west side. Task 3, design guidelines, and this gets a little bit more into the nuts and bolts. The vehicular bridges, pedestrian bridges, retaining walls, noise walls, fencing, lighting, intersection treatments, bicycle and pedestrian amenities, and landscape. Vehicular bridges are identified in red that actually go over Business 40, and then Brookstown Avenue is the one that goes under Business 40. There's a lot to cover in the vehicular bridges. Arched beams on Peters Creek Parkway and Church Street, excuse me. Arched or horizontal bridge beams on intermediate bridges, and that's one of those items that's still under discussion. Center piers required for Peters Creek Parkway and Church Street bridges just due to the size of those bridges. Intermediate bridges between those two are proposed to have no center piers to maximize those views and to minimize obstructions in the roadway. Brick veneer cast in place or stamped stained on walls below bridges and adjacent to the bridges. And that is something new that we've brought in based on feedback from you all and from Creative Corridors, Business 40 working groups, and so on. And we are working with DOT to figure out how we can actually make that work. Concrete pilasters located at ends of all bridges, pilasters to be designed for future sculpture, loading, and electrical needs. Either a 2-bar rail or a metal picket. That's another one of those items that's up for discussion. And then we will be providing conduit on all the bridges for future pedestrian and architectural lighting. We are proposing future pedestrian scale ornamental pole lights to be located between the back of curb and the sidewalk so that they don't impede the view of the bridge from the driver's perspective. Again, Peters Creek Parkway Bridge, we've already seen this one. You can see the arches, and then there's a hint of brick underneath. Church Street, and this is, again, one of the most elegant bridges that we have just due to the width of it and the height, the clearance that we have above the roadway. We're able to do a little bit more with this one. And this one does have a center pilaster as well because it has a center pier, and that is also an opportunity for sculpture above. We have incorporated the brick walls along the bridges and underneath the bridges. What we're hearing from DOT is that we have the potential to do this if we stay above the crash height, and we're still trying to determine what that height is. We're thinking 8 to 10 feet. So where we have walls tall enough, we can incorporate brick into these walls.
What is crash height?
Wherever it's possible for a vehicle to run into the wall and to actually hit it so that it might knock something off.
Okay.
View of Marshall and Cherry Street, and these would be similar to, or these would be precedents for all the intermediary bridges that are able to not have center piers. And we have 2 options for this. You'll see a slight difference in the 2. But we've incorporated the brick on these with concrete accents. This one has a flat beam or horizontal beam and the 2-bar rail. And then this one has the arched beam and the center pilasters with the vertical rail. Retaining walls, like we were just talking about, enhancements to retaining walls will be at a premium cost, but we're working that out. The height, location, and design of the retaining walls will be dictated by physical and engineering constraints, mostly by the design build team when they are awarded the contract. Proposed horizontal appearance for walls where practical, so we want a level top to these, a flat top, so that they are more architectural in character. Limestone block and a running bond pattern, and this would be a concrete form liner, which could be similar to this or what you see in this image here, or even this image back here. And then proposed brick veneer or inlay or stamped stained brick pattern for walls adjacent to and under bridges. And again, those restrictions are something that we're still working on with DOT. Just an elevation view, and this is looking, for instance, at the Marshall Street Bridge, which is right here in the center. And so you're actually standing in the roadway looking at the wall. And so what we're proposing is this would be the crash barrier or the Jersey barrier, so that would be 4 feet high. And we're also looking into whether we could actually also stamp that to match the wall itself. And then there would be probably 8 to 10 feet, again, we don't know that height, that would need to be concrete, and that could be form lined to look like limestone, and then the brick panels above. Noise walls. I think it's the preference of everyone where we have space to landscape in front of these noise walls to disguise them as much as possible. So, for instance, at the Salem Point neighborhood, where we actually have some space, we'll be able to do that. In other areas, we do not have the space to do that, and so using a more attractive form liner for these walls is the preferred method. Again, transparent noise walls will be used on Peters Creek Parkway, or are proposed there, and where we can, we'll use an artistic or graphic pattern form liner for the noise walls. Fencing, ornamental metal fence to be used in high priority locations, such as adjacent to sidewalks or public spaces, wherever it's highly visible. And then black chain link would be used where it's a little further off the roadway or out of the view of the public. Lighting. This is one of those items that's still under discussion. We're looking at black Cobra head LED roadway lighting, which would be represented by something like this. If we really had the funds, we would do something a little more interesting like this. And then pedestrian scale ornamental pole lights on our local streets. And then part of the discussion there is whether it's more traditional, like this image here, or a little more modern. And then architectural accent lighting is going to be extremely important for the bridges, the pedestrian bridges, and sculpture locations. And if any of you have seen Artivity at night, it is wonderful with its accent lighting. It's an exciting place to be. And to have more of that in our city would be fantastic. Intersection treatments. High visibility crosswalks will be the standard, and that is represented here. It's much easier for the driver and the pedestrian to see these. And so that will be the standard for all the new intersection treatments. Looking at potential for bike lane and bike pedestrian lane markings, and then potential for art in the intersections or in the crosswalks. And that is also something that can come later, either as funding comes available or as it's deemed necessary. Bicycle and pedestrian amenities. We want to start thinking about things like transit shelters where it's appropriate, bicycle parking, providing bike racks, and shelters for parking, benches, receptacles, recycling and trash, pet waste stations, bollards where they're needed, and planters. The landscape was the final one. The Business 40 corridor landscape, and this is something we have not done a lot on, and we'll be working on this as we go further in the process. We do have to meet the guidelines for planning within the highway right-of-way, and that is a document that we have to follow. So there's a certain distance that you have to be off the roadway with trees, and with different size of trees. We do propose to use native plant species where feasible, species that are beneficial to birds and insects as either habitat or food, and then plants that have four-season interest. On the local streets, street trees are important. Medians and planting strips can be much more interesting than just mowed grass, and then using low hedges as pedestrian buffers. Next steps, cost estimates. That'll be the big one, and we'll get to talk about that next time. Continued coordination with Creative Corridors and DOT on the pedestrian bridge designs and the associated costs for those items, and that is ongoing. City Council will select the project betterments in July based on cost and preference. A municipal agreement will need to be prepared in September, and then the specifications will be written starting in October. And I'd like to share the video again. It has been updated somewhat. We do not have the new bridges in the actual model, but the renderings are in there. And it is further along than you saw it last time. Audio.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Any questions? Yes, Ms. White.
This is, I don't think many of the, or any of the committee actually was at the last Davenport meeting. And there was a lot of consternation when we actually saw the First and Second Street scenario, because there's no way that either one of those can be all two-way. It's a case of having to shift from one-way to two-way to one-way, whatever. So that's certainly something that I think needs to be rethought, because it seems to me having that on again, off again, on again is more dangerous than, than needs to be. So just as a heads up, that might be something that needs to be changed.
Mr. Turner, any comment?
No, I have not seen their proposal yet, but I will look into that. And I would say, to prove your point, just drive down 3rd Street.
Yeah. Right.
Mr. Clark.
I see Mr. Ivy back there. Pat, come on up a minute. And our guest from Raleigh, welcome again. Pat, I'll just pick Peters Creek as an example. You're going to replace that bridge.
Correct.
The question here is, what does it cost to make it 12 feet wider? I think is what they said. And they want it, the tunnel under itself. And I'm assuming they redo that road as well.
That's correct.
And I just use that as one example. Any of the others, the Broad and the Cherry Street bridges, they're talking about lengthening them and things of that sort. My question to you as a representative of the state, how much state money is available to widen, say, Peters Creek Bridge? Because this all looks great, but I see a huge price tag for all this, and got to come up with the money. So how much can the state help us in general on these? And you go through the whole list of them.
Right. Well, basically, in general, we have provided or are working on the cost estimates for all of these enhancements as we speak, and that was part of the presentation. Is that as we come back to the committee here, I think in July, we'll have a better idea about what those specific costs will be. We do have a general idea now that we have provided, and we're working through all those details. DOT, our policy has been that we basically provide the standard bridge with some minor enhancements like, some bridge railings and things like that as part of our project. Anything above and beyond that would typically be the responsibility of others, whether it's the city, creative corridors, the public, whoever would come up with those additional costs. We have received a request from the Transportation Department here to look at additional funding by DOT for some portion of these enhancements. We're working on getting with the Secretary of Transportation, who would have to make that decision on if there were additional funding to take care of, for example, the retaining walls, the stamping and the staining of the retaining walls. Is that something that we can do as a department? So we're working on that now to determine if indeed there are additional funds available by DOT to help with this.
So, for example, and I'll switch gears here, on the Broad and Cherry Street lengthenings, you will calculate what the standard bridge costs and what it costs to have one 12 feet longer, and the difference is the issue.
That is correct, yes.
Second question, in addition to the Broad Street and the Peters Creek and this, that, and the other, there's also this multi-use strollway that meanders, starts at kind of the Baptist Hospital, comes up, goes across Peters Creek under Peters Creek Road, wanders back up. Are you also doing the cost estimate on that? Because that's really not a road project.
The only thing that we have done in terms of cost estimating is the additional work that would be required under the Business 40 project to accommodate a future multi-use path.
For example, the tunnel under Peters Creek would certainly make sense to do.
That is something that we're costing out.
Okay, and last question, the strollway they're recommending it go over, is that what was in your original plans?
The original plan from the very beginning was for the strollway to go under Business 40 as it does now. When we made the change to flip Liberty and Business 40, that actually made going over the over Business 40 more cost effective because we eliminated, I think, 4 bridges on Business 40, and we were able to, we were able to use that money to actually build a standard bridge over Business 40.
You're doing what you call the big dig. You're taking 40 fairly low.
Correct. Yes, sir.
So it would make sense to put the Strollway over it.
Yes, it worked out very well in terms of grade and things like
So
that.
we think we will have all these numbers in June?
July?
July.
Yes, July.
That's in 21 days.
Correct.
Okay.
We've got the majority of everything. We're just fine tuning now.
I'll look forward to hearing from you.
Very good.
Mr. McIntosh.
And this is probably for you as well, for Pat. The parcels that are freed up that are currently being used as ramps and will be eliminated, those parcels will go back to the state. The state will own those.
We do own those as right-of-way now, and as we've done in some other projects as well, our right-of-way disposal committee in Raleigh can look at requests to dispose of certain portions of that right-of-way. In this case, would probably be to the city.
Right.
And we've done that on some other cases as well. So we would work with you all after the project is completed on that process.
Great. Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Ivy before he?
Right here.
Makes sense, right?
Thank you, Mr. Ivy.
My pleasure.
Other comments or questions?
I'd just like to
Yes,
say
Mr. Taylor.
I've offered my comments on this plan before. I think this is a wonderful plan, and I wish that we could do everything that we saw, and hopefully we can get together and try to make that happen. As unrealistic as it may sound, I want to take a moment and just thank Stimmel. Great presentation, city staff, state DOT, the city DOT, and definitely the Creative Corridors Coalition. There's a lot of hard work, as I understand it, that went into this project, and I couldn't have asked for a better presentation. I mean, I think it was extremely detail-oriented. It gave us an excellent vision on how things might be if we continue to work together. And I like the multi-use paths, and some of the other pedestrian strollways. And I saw a really cool guy walking up one of those paths, and they looked a lot like me. And I know
he was running.
He had that flag, didn't he?
but it's much appreciation to everyone who helped to make this happen. We've got to roll up our sleeves and get a little bit more work done, but I'm excited about the process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I will note that was a visionary presentation with the recognition that some of that investment can be staged. And one of the things that we anticipate receiving in July is more detailed information on what it will cost to do what we would have to do now to maintain all that infrastructure as an option for the future. Right. And I understand that staff is looking at places that we can get some of that funding as well. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll see you again next month.
Absolutely.
And I believe that brings us to item 2 then, please.
Item G2, update on street lighting policy.
All right, and Mr. Turner, you're on the list again. Is there someone else that we call up?
And I'll tackle this
All
one.
right. Mr. Turner.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as none of you will recall, back in 1991, the city implemented a street lighting policy to begin the transition from mercury vapor lighting to high-pressure sodium lighting because of the essentially doubling of the light quantity that you got for the same amount of electricity. Actually, it was more than double. Mercury vapor is 4,000 lumens. High-pressure sodium is 9,500 lumens for 100 watts. Recently, Duke Power has advised us that they actually have a LED street lighting that has been approved by the State Utilities Commission, which is the regulating body over Duke Power, and that is available for cities to begin installation. The city actually has installed LED street lighting on Motor Road, and Ms. Turner talked about the different concepts for Business 40, one of which was very similar to lighting that we have on Research Parkway, and that has LED pedestrian lighting. What we are seeing with LED street lighting is that you get the same amount of lighting for half the power. So in the 1990s, we went for twice the lighting for the same amount of power. What we're proposing here is to get the same amount of lighting for half the power, if I said that right.
All right. And so the proposal here, the earlier item was an information item. We'll get to questions in just a moment, but is this an action item today?
If the committee is comfortable with it, we would recommend that we bring it back to you as a policy change. We wanted to get your temper on this item, but yes, it would be coming back as a policy, official city policy change via a resolution.
All right, very good. Mr. Montgomery.
No, this is something particularly I know I've inquired in the past about LED lights in some different locations, and I'd be happy to see us move to a place of policy change for including LEDs. I have a question in reference to the rate, the dollar amount per year compared to what we get in the efficiency. Is that based upon what the standard charge rate is from Duke Energy, that you don't see the same reduction, the 50% less power, you don't see 50% less in what we're paying?
It is a good question, and the rate that Duke charges us for a fixture, whether it's LED, mercury vapor, high pressure sodium, whatever, includes both electricity as well as ongoing maintenance of the pole, fixture, and arm. So our hope is that over time, because of the lower maintenance cost that Duke Power should experience with not having to go out and what's called relamp these fixtures, that we would see that rate structure go down, but that'll be up to the state and the State Utilities Commission. But yes, there is more than just electricity in the cost that we pay.
Ms. Adams and then Mr. Clark.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Turner. I guess I was going to ask, and as we always do, as we move towards this, we will do a thorough job of educating our citizens of what's coming. I know they see Motor Road. I see Motor Road. I like it. I like the Research Park area as well. But you know how our residents or citizens think when we replace some of these lights. You know your department gets calls saying, it's not light enough. It's too dark. What happened to my old street light? I want that back. So I think if we do the same job we did with the sanitation and the rollout carts and recycling, I think we'll be on point with this.
Certainly. We will work with marketing on this. The good news, in addition to the financial, the cost is lower, even though it's not exactly half. The lower energy footprint, therefore the smaller carbon footprint that we have. The LED lights give you a more pure light, more like natural sunlight, at least much more than the high-pressure sodium, which had a yellow tinge. And when we first implemented those, we came up with the phrase citrus lumophobia, which was the irrational fear of yellow streetlights. But we did get a lot of complaints from citizens saying that, well, they're just not as attractive as the old mercury vapor or as some of the old technologies, because they gave you a more pure white light. And so the LEDs bring us back to that.
Okay, Mr. Clark?
The high-pressure sodium, is that the Cobra Head ones?
Well, they could be Cobra Head or they could be cutoff fixtures, but yes, they usually are Cobra Head.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That's the yellow one.
And they're yellow?
Yes.
Yellow. Okay. In the notes, there's roughly 5,900 mercury vapor left, and they are replacing those as the bulbs burn out because they can't get new bulbs.
Correct.
And those, in the resolution that will come back to us, we will adopt a new policy that says when the mercury vapors go out, they'll be replaced with the LEDs.
Yes.
Do you have any idea how many total streetlights we have?
I don't, but there are people in the audience that do.
33,000.
Okay, that was going to be my second guess, 33,000. The reason I asked that, we have roughly 15% then are the old mercury vapor and 85% of the high-pressure sodium. Will they continue to replace the high-pressure sodiums with high-pressure sodium bulbs as they wear out, and then only replace them when the whole thing goes out?
We would have to initiate, as the contracts for the high-pressure sodium expire, we could request a Duke Power change out to the LEDs. We have a contract when we put in a light for a certain period of time. If we have that light removed early, then we have an early payout penalty. Once that contract period has expired, then we can request it to be converted over to another technology.
Okay. What I'm kind of getting up to, we have roughly 27,000 Cobra Head high-pressure sodium yellow lights. order of magnitude, what would they charge if we said, okay, change them out? And to answer or to comment on Mr. Montgomery's question, I do go to church with Jimmy Blythe, who is our Duke fireman. The fixture is a lot more expensive, and that's why there's very little savings, one-time cost. What they also are dealing with is they really, until recently, have struggled with what is the useful life of an LED fixture in the bulbs, because it's not one bulb up there, it's hundreds of little LEDs. So over time, they will burn out, and at what point do enough burn out that you need to replace it? So I know they've needed some history to kind of get there. But there still is it's $19 cheaper per year for us for the LED versus either of the two. So my question is, if we wanted to financially incentivize them to change out the Cobra heads to LEDs, what would that cost be? And I'm going to try to do an economic return in, how many years of $19 savings.
We'll have to ask Duke Power specifically that question and bring it back.
And I suspect it's probably not economically feasible at this time. It probably makes sense to change them out as the fixtures.
Mr. Montgomery, and then Ms. Light.
Councilman Clark just touched on the point.
All right, Ms. Light.
Is it true that as they advertise how much longer the LED bulbs last?
I think what you see in typical advertisements is for a domestic household situation.
Yeah.
And
Does
it's
that translate to?
It's a lot different out there in the real world of temperature variations you get at the top of a utility pole.
And BB guns and other things.
Oh, yeah, I expect that to do a
I would
job.
note the LEDs are a smaller target.
More of them.
Fair statement.
They'll hit one.
Savings is
Ms. Adams.
One more question. Does this fit into our footprint for sustainability, the goals that we've set
Absolutely.
about 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is a good idea, but I do have one question. We had almost a test case experience in part of the Ardmore neighborhood with a handful of mercury vapor lights that went out around about a 2-block area that were replaced with LEDs. I think they look fine, but some of the neighbors complained, said that they were harder on their eyes. They gave them a headache. Not everybody. It was like one or two folks. Do we have any information, or does Duke have any information available on the street experience with comparing the reactions of nearby residents comparing LED to the high pressure sodium to the mercury vapor?
We will check. I do know that for some LED technologies, there's a flicker effect. I have only noticed it in confined spaces. I haven't noticed it with the motor road street lighting or the other street lighting that we've been talking about. But we'll check with Duke and see if they've experienced or had any complaints about that issue.
Also, if there is any information available on biological impacts comparatively. You'd think off the top of your head that there wouldn't be any difference between an equal light level of the white light versus the yellow light, but there may well be different impacts on different species. Pardon? What?
Blanca phobia?
Not so much
Blanca-lumophobia?
Not so much Blanca-lumophobia as impacts on owls, for example. We've got a good plenty of those in our urban neighborhoods. Or bats, yeah. And that's a serious question.
They're blind.
Yeah, sure.
And could we get some information or data about any other cities, Mr. Turner, in North Carolina that have converted a lot further along than where we are right now? And any kinds of comments from the citizens or anything?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right, and then this will come back. When do we anticipate this will come back?
We can bring this one in July. It's not a problem.
Okay, and then we'll see that in July. Mr. Clark, did you have something you wanted to ask about the stadium?
I want to ask about the stadium. Are we finished with this item?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, just that we're doing the underground testing at Old Bowling Gray Stadium. Couple questions. One, what we can find out about the history of it. I know the stadium was built in the early 1930s, or whatever. So obviously, if there was a landfill there, it was finished by then. Whatever we can find, maybe how big a footprint it is. I'm concerned what our legal obligation is. And the other question I have, if methane is a natural product of decomposition, does it not make sense if we do have it in certain areas to go ahead and drill and ventilate it?
So Councilmember Clark, one of the staff is going to come forward, Marilyn and Jensen Goodhold, but in the interim, as she speaks about that, I will tell you that a lot of the questions that you just raised have been addressed by a team of people from the Stormwater Division, and they've worked in conjunction with the legal team and all, and we have done title searches going back. And there certainly are municipal landfills, but we are looking also at private landfills. There's a large footprint of property in the MLK corridor extending westward and a little bit eastward. And some of that is private development that was built upon existing landfills.
Yeah.
And of course, the landfill under Bowman Gray was a inert, or I think demolition landfill, and there's an impact of methane coming from some sources that they're looking at. But it does go back approaching 100 years for those sources. And so we're going to divide between what is, the responsibility of or owned by the city, and what may be something inherited or created by a private developer.
And I certainly don't need those answers today, but I just think we need to be up to speed on it. And I was certainly thinking 100 years, a lot of it is decomposition should be close to being done. I don't know how long it takes for this stuff to deteriorate. But I'm just wondering if that makes sense to ventilate it and get the methane out of the ground.
So there are a few different methods that can be used. Ventilation, I think Salem College is one example of that.
Yep.
That's a method because once you can get it out into the atmosphere, it will rapidly dissipate.
Yes.
Some spots right now, I think it's been reported publicly, it's so dense that it's beyond the 5 to 15% flammability point. Of course, when you reduce it, it will go into that range, and you want that time period to be quick. But there are mediation efforts that are available, and we'll, of course, figure out which one's the most
But it might be good, Mr. Chairman, if we just put that on the agenda for a future meeting.
That's a good idea. There are some real downsides to just ventilation. This, as a greenhouse gas, it's about, I think, 20 times the potency of carbon dioxide. But we do have a capture and use operation at Haynesville Landfill.
I would be surprised if we have enough gas here to capture.
I wouldn't rule it out. I've asked Mr. Garrity to ask staff to take a look at that.
Everyone, I mean, I have leaves and limbs and brush decomposing in my yard all the time.
Because you don't rake them.
So, I mean, it is a natural occurring item, and I'm just concerned that the biggest concern is get trapped in a building, and we do have our field house there. That's the main structure that's in there. Of course, there's residential houses around.
Yeah,
So I just think we need to get our hands around the whole thing. You've certainly asked some good questions, it sounds like, and I think at some appropriate time, we need to get a complete review from our staff on kind of what's going on.
That's a good idea. We'll put that on the future agenda.
Okay.
Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, I agree we need a complete review. I represent some of the community, well, all of the communities to the west. I think Councilman Montgomery represents those to the east. Mr. City Manager, is also important that we keep the citizens updated. I know any information that's available. I know we'll hold town hall meetings. Everybody won't make those town hall meetings, so we have to send out letters to let them know what the situation and condition is and what we might be doing in the future. That's something that we definitely have to do.
Ms. Light.
Isn't it strange that this whole area was a demolition landfill? What is to decompose to form the methane?
Councilmember Light, based on the research that the contractor has shown the city staff, the area under the actual field and the field house was a demolition landfill, but it appears that both the area to the west of that, which is we refer to as the lower west parking lot that goes towards Diggs Boulevard behind the stadium, as well as the area across MLK to the east, that parts of that were actually sanitary landfills with household, and that's where the high readings we have gotten.
One other factor is keep in mind that what we consider to be construction and demolition materials today is a lot more restrictive than what was considered to be C&D waste 50, 20, 30 years
That's a
ago.
good point.
Thank you.
Good. Mr. Turner, do we have anything else?
No.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and we are adjourned.